I mean, it's cool to have that in there. I mean, we can't be perfect.
Right. You're right. Welcome to the first edition of the Thought Mining Podcast. The Thought Mining Podcast is a brainchild of myself and my co-host, Dr. Nathan Anderson. And we've been discussing for a while how we can find deeper truths in our life. And we have a few different methods we've been looking for, or we've been using to try to find these deeper truths. And we want to share them with you, and hopefully we'll be able to plant a seed within the audience on a literal and metaphorical level. So let me hand it over to my co-host to explain maybe a little more with more clarity than I did.
Thanks, Derek. It's a pleasure to be on this journey with you.
Thank you.
This idea for thought mining surfaced, well, it was last spring, essentially, but it never really took any shape until recently as we started exploring possibilities for podcasts and topics and things that we could potentially discuss. And I brought up this thought mining idea, and it seemed to resonate a bit with you, and we decided let's go ahead and give it a go and see what it's all about. So this thought mining idea, I'm going to read a reflection that I had written on this based on my interpretation of it when I woke up in the middle of the night one night. That seems to be where sometimes some of the most interesting thoughts arise is after a deep slumber. So March 16th, 2023, I'm in the habit of writing thoughts down periodically when I wake up in the middle of the night.
Which is a great practice. Do you mind just briefly describing how you fell upon that practice or how you discovered that practice?
I think the origins of it probably date back to when I was in graduate school and I was given a task of completing an independent study. Mm-hmm. And the idea for the independent study was determined by my advisor at the time and myself. Mm-hmm. I wasn't too sure what the topic would be or even how to proceed with it. And she had understood sort of what my interests were. She said, what about something like developing a reflective scholar? Here's a book or two that might interest you related to that. And I said, this sounds great. I'd be overjoyed to pursue something like that, essentially, because it seemed to line up really well with my interests. And after I took on the project, I didn't really know where to go with it. And so I started getting in the habit of just writing down my thoughts as they arose that seemed related to that topic. And it turned into a project that I felt proud of at the end of the semester and was able to turn in. And it was like a series of 50 pages of reflections that I had written that then became sort of synthesized into a paper. And going back to your question of how I got in the habit of writing thoughts as they arose, it sort of stemmed from that. It gave me confidence in writing down thoughts as they surfaced and being receptive to the inspiration to jot down sort of thoughts that seem to randomly arise in your mind. And I've sort of carried that over into other areas of my life now, and I fairly regularly will jot down seemingly random thoughts in my phone as they pop into my mind.
Before we get back to reading the thoughts, can I ask you one quick question?
Sure.
When you wake up in the night and let's say you're kind of, as many of us, we get a cascade of thoughts that might have to deal with the anxiety of tomorrow or maybe even, something we did in the past will just randomly jump into our brain and we're like, oh, what'd you do that for type of thing. And you get these sort of chatter going on in your brain. Does writing it down help you go back to sleep?
That's a good question. I haven't really approached it in that type of a way with writing down thoughts of anticipations of what I'm going to do or what maybe I had done the previous day that I was sort of ruminating on. I sort of let those, sometimes I get caught up in them, I guess, and I get attached to them and they sort of carry me away in these uncomfortable intellectual or emotional spaces. But other times I'm able to sort of just let them drift by and observe them as they flow past my consciousness. The types of thoughts that I will write down are those that seem to just suddenly arise that I'm not really thinking about necessarily what I'm doing or any sort of task type of orientation or outcomes that I'm looking to achieve or have my mind set on. It's just sort of these things that kind of drift in through my consciousness that seem to surface out of nowhere almost, and they resonate. And then I used to not write that type of stuff down. I used to just let it go and think, I'll just reflect on it later.
Right.
But now I've gotten into the habit, if like a sentence pops in my mind, I write it down. Like I went for a run a couple days ago. I was stretching under the bridge with the water kind of flowing under the ice, and something popped into my mind. I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm going to write that. So I end up putting these into this journal that's called Evolution of Thought. And it's a place for me to write down thoughts that are not really connected to any sort of other project, I guess, that I'm working on at the time. They might eventually translate into something other than, or a project of some sort, but it's kind of like origins of thoughts that seem unrelated to other things, but seem important for me.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear more. I've read some of this already, spoiler alert, but I'm really pleased that you're willing to share it, and I'm excited to dig into this.
All right, thanks. So March 16th, 2023, this is the entry here, thought mining. This is what I wrote in the middle of the night, 2 a.m.-ish maybe. Thought mining. The extraction of meaningful insights from an array of thoughts. Thought mining may be internal, external, or shared. Internal thought mining is the extraction of meaningful insights from one's own array of thoughts. Internal thought mining occurs within thoughts inside oneself. External thought mining is the extraction of meaningful insights from an array of thoughts representing one or more individuals outside of oneself. External thought mining occurs with others' thoughts outside of oneself. You'll see some like redundancies, duplications.
That's why I have it at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah,
kind of like
okay.
free flowing thoughts typed in the notes on my phone. Want me to keep going?
Well, let's. I think that there's already some stuff that we could talk about there. So, like, the idea of thought mining is, to an extent, I guess to analogize it to mining, right? Is, if you're looking for gold in a mountain, you've got 99% mountain and 1% gold. It's a bit of a needle in a haystack situation. And with thought mining, it might be something similar in terms of like there's a lot of cascading thoughts happening, and maybe some of them will seem irrelevant or maybe unhealthy to an extent. Like, maybe you'll get caught up thinking about some silly thing you said in front of the class in 8th grade, or and then you embarrassed yourself or whatever. Some kind of irrelevancy will pop in here and there, and so essentially, you're looking for the needle in the haystack. Maybe it's not that rare, to find something valuable in your unconscious as a needle in a haystack situation. But essentially, what we're doing is we're letting go of the need to control what's happening with our thoughts, but instead becoming an observer and seeing the stream passing by and looking for value in the stream and looking to sort of snatch that a little bit, maybe a little bit of thought fishing, or I don't know, got to change the name of the podcast. No, but you know what I mean. Like in terms of we're trying to find the gold in the mountain, right? And the mountain being the just cascade of noise that's happening, but maybe it's not noise. Maybe there's signal in there, and we're looking to maybe make our antenna so strong that it's always getting signal. Is that?
Yeah, that's a helpful interpretation. I appreciate the way that you explain that. I do feel like that resonates with me quite a bit, the way that you explain that. There are so many different thoughts that go through my mind throughout the day that seem, maybe they have value, but they seem sort of moot at times in terms of how much value they add really to my overall well-being. And oftentimes they create emotional or intellectual challenges for me that I probably don't need to endure at that stage of my day.
Yep.
And so being in sort of that thought mining type of state of mind and allowing, knowing that thoughts are continuously going through my mind, I am sort of trying to position myself in a way that allows me to take some of those thoughts out of there that are valuable, and then kind of wrestle with those a little bit and try to extract deeper meaning out of those. You used gold mining as an example. Another example that comes to mind that's pretty closely related to what I do for a living is data mining. There are so many different data elements out there and different data sets, and I work in higher education assessment, and there are tons of data points that we're sort of swimming in constantly, and trying to pick out the data elements or data points that are valuable is a mining type of exercise, and there's a whole field of data mining, I guess, that is kind of that makes me sort of see parallels between that and thought mining. It's like we have all these things that could potentially be valuable, but are they? And can we extract them in ways that we can actually create some sort of value out of them?
And also, I think with what you're saying about could these things be potentially valuable, only I think maybe we ourselves can decide that to an extent, right? So like I could maybe have a thought and I'll be like, well, no one's going to think that's a smart thought. I just need to let that go. But I've externalized that it won't be accepted or isn't good, but I'm actually projecting that onto other people judging me in this fantasy, right? So I'm like, well, people will think that I'm wrong, and I, you know what I mean? So like that kind of thing can creep in as well. I think I might have lost my train of thought a little bit. Anyways, please continue.
No, it's good. Like
I fell off the bus a little bit mentally.
Thinking about sort of how others are interpreting it and what they might think if you actually express that in some sort of a way can be a barrier.
Well, I tend to also like I will play out these fictional scenarios already. So if I think of a thought, like maybe I feel like the imaginary friends in my head or whatever have to accept it before I will say it to someone like you and be like, okay, well, it seems like this is reasonable. It seems like this is logical. Let me double check this idea. Now I can present it to somebody and in the real world, the real space or whatever. So I guess there is like a filter too, then you are your own filter to an extent. Right? Does that make any sense, or am I just going off the boards here?
Yeah, no, it does totally. You're sort of filtering out what you're comfortable sharing. I mean, you're running what you have going through your mind through your own filter so that you can share things that you're comfortable sharing and maybe hold back things that you're not comfortable sharing. And you might not be comfortable sharing them because you feel sort of threatened by the potential perceptions of others.
And maybe that's... I'm not going to say anybody's like wrong for doing that or I'm wrong for doing that. Or I think it's very human nature to, fear the judgment of the group or the others or whatever and just think, well, this idea is too out there. This is too kooky. People are going to think I'm wild or whatever. So, but we all really have these wild and kooky thoughts. I mean, to deny that truth would be just lying, right? So even the most like judgmental person with the seemingly narrowest scope of what's acceptable and what's not in terms of behavior has these wild and kooky thoughts at 2:00 in the morning too. You know what I mean? So what can anybody do to to harness it to an extent, right? So like sometimes maybe you'll hear a story where somebody had a brilliant idea in the middle of the night, light bulb moment, write it down, and they go on to change the whole world. Maybe Steve Jobs' iPhone, a phone that's a computer in your pocket. Oh my God, he wrote it down, and that's probably how it happened. And now all of our lives are like forever changed because he was he saw the value in something that was flowing through the stream and decided to really latch onto it and to trust himself. And I think that's also part of it is like trusting that I know this thing is valuable because I'm applying all the parameters of value that I think in my value system, and I'm going to present this to the outside world now because I'm confident in its value. I'm not going to suppress it or hide it inside of myself or whatever, or just ignore it and let the stream go by or whatever. And I think that the challenge or the idea of doing that is not something that everybody finds appealing, right? So it's not that like you're a bad person or there's something wrong with you if you're not thought mining and you're not waking up at 2 a.m. and you're not trying to find the deeper meanings in your unconsciousness. But I do think it's a choice that people make, and a lot of times it's based on, it could be just who we were born as babies and grew into these types of adults, and now we're just wanting to like find these deeper meanings. It could be environmental, it could be that we were raised by very thoughtful and introspective people, it could be a number of things, really. Hopefully I'm adding something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, I'd like to hear more. Let's move.
Okay, I'll read a little bit more. I think I stopped on external thought mining occurs with others' thoughts outside of oneself. And then then it goes into shared thought mining is the extraction of meaningful insights between the thoughts of oneself and at least one other person. And so in a way, we're sort of going through this shared thought mining process in the format of this podcast. But
also, absolutely. And also I think that maybe a lot of people are doing thought mining already and they're not really aware of it, or they just haven't, I think you coined the term thought mining. So Nathan Anderson, did you coin it?
I don't know,
I've never seen it in writing or anywhere else, so I'm going to give you credit for it. I'm going to credit Dr. Nathan Anderson with the term thought mining. I think we could, put that in the dictionary at some point, But, I think people probably have engaged or are engaging in thought mining, even maybe over a beer at the local pub, or they're doing it at work, trying to solve a problem, or, with their spouse, trying to imagine a future. There's so many ways that we're doing it, basically using our imaginations and connecting our imaginations with material world, or with the real world that we live in, or the quote-unquote real world, that we live within. So taking something from, maybe the ether and turning it into a material object, which I think is, the coolest part about being alive is the creative element, whatever it is. Like whether it's, there's creativity in fixing your car, absolutely. There's creativity in that. There's creativity in, putting down new flooring tiles as you did the other weekend. Because there's always going to be the element of like, oh, I thought it was going to be this way, but then it ended up being this way. So now I have to pivot and I have to figure out how to do this. And, this creativity is problem solving too.
Right.
And maybe thought mining, weirdly enough, is problem solving if we want to see it that way.
Yeah, it sure could be to an extent. We'll kind of see where it goes, sort of what the concept evolves into. And
I think we need to strengthen our thought mining muscles, a lot of us. And I think you're very strong at it because of your especially background and also probably just how you naturally are. I can tell that you're very strong at, looking for deeper meanings and finding value in the noise, value in the clutter and things like that. And maybe through your professional life, you've even strengthened that muscle, to a large extent. So I think that, I think there's a lot of value that we can bring just discussing and talking about this topic.
Cool. Yeah. The term itself, if it hasn't been used before, and this is sort of the first time it's being explained in this way, that's pretty cool. But, the practices themselves have been going on for ages, forever.
Right.
This is just bringing sort of a language to it, I suppose.
Yep. And maybe even just a modern take on it, because there's probably, Euripides from ancient Greece, or, I'm just making people up. But, I'm sure if you dig into Aristotle or something like that, he probably says something kind of like that, but it's just a lot of that stuff is impenetrable to people that aren't maybe studying that at a PhD or master's level, because it's ancient Greek and there's so many interpretations and it's not presented in a user-friendly format. So I think that, maybe these are themes that we're not discussing in pop culture that have been important pop culture themes in history, but we just wouldn't have the awareness of it because we're not studying the humanities at a high level, for the most part, in high school or college.
Right, right. Yeah.
So maybe we're just actually arriving on the same truths as Euclid or whatever,
Yeah, I'm sure there's stuff all over the place that's sort of speaking to this essence.
The universality of humans, we can be in this entirely different structure maybe and also be exactly in the same predicament, social structure completely different, but our brain is completely the same,
Right. Right. And maybe the language of this thought mining will resonate with some, and they'll be able to sort of maybe embed that type of practice into their lives in ways that are appropriate for their well-being, when maybe they wouldn't have been exposed or maybe wouldn't have understood or been exposed to that type of practice, through other language. I guess I think of differentiated instruction a lot, and in terms of how one instructional strategy or set of content will resonate with one type of learner, but it doesn't resonate with another type of learner. So then you kind of repackage that content in different language or deliver it through a different instructional strategy, and then it all of a sudden does resonate with them. And so I'm such a big believer in that because I've seen in my own life how things have been presented to me time and time again that just haven't clicked, and then it's presented to me using different language or in a different way, and then all of a sudden, hey, I get what that means now. And, I feel like this maybe is just another example of that.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And just thinking about teaching and pedagogy in general, like one thing I've noticed about, because I had teachers that I didn't resonate with in the past, and I try to think about what it was about their style that wasn't fitting for me. And I think that I kind of pinpointed one thing I don't like. I don't know if it's everything, but one thing I've noticed about certain instructors, and I want to call out a certain, coding instructor was trying to teach me coding at one point in my life. And I feel that some people that are in instructing positions, it's like they're trying to show off how much they know to an extent. It's like, oh, I know this and I know that and I know this, you know what I mean? But when you're taking a person through a learning process, it's like they need to take the baby steps that you took, you know what I mean? So a lot of times we didn't learn this stuff overnight. Why are we trying to teach it overnight? You know what I mean? It took me 5 years to learn this particular thing, and here I am trying to jam it in someone's brain and then being like, why don't you get it? It's like, well, think about me. For me, even with something like videography and photography, which I consider myself to be pretty good at or expert at. For the first couple of years, there were certain fundamental terms that I was just kind of let's just kind of pretending that I had a grasp of, because it was convenient at the time to want to be an expert and not want to be real about where my expertise limits lie, and I think there can be ego involved in that, or just not wanting to feel like, or maybe you want to hang with the big boys to an extent, and you don't want to be seen as the little boy, or the little kid or whatever, the learner, the student. You want to be already arrived, right? And so sometimes when you already want to be arrived, you want to just skip all the steps. I don't need all that fundamental stuff. I just want to get to the high level stuff, because that's where I belong. You know? And you may belong there, but you just maybe now isn't the time. And you might need to, get back to basics a little bit. Get back to the seeds that we're planting. And that's, anyway, I don't know. I feel like I also I go off on roads, and then I look around and I'm like, where am I?
There are cool roads to go on. It's a lot like physical fitness, if you can, let's say, bench press 100 pounds and you want to bench press 200 pounds, you can't skip the steps of increasing your physical strength just by putting on plates that equal 200 pounds. And then you're all of a sudden thinking you're going to be able to lift them when in reality your max is 100 pounds.
Yeah, maybe you've got like the machine that kind of like helps you a little, and then you're just like lying to yourself, even though you're like you're doing it, but you're not really doing it, because really doing it means you'd have no machine and you'd have nobody holding it for you or whatever. So you just like have the need to accomplish the number so much, like I need to get to 200. So then you just sort of lie to yourself to an extent about how you got there or what. I think especially with physical fitness, not to go on a rant about physical fitness, but my feeling is a lot of people overtrain themselves to injury, and because they're trying to get to six-pack in 6 weeks, and it's like, hey, just take 6 years, I mean, just take the slow road, because then you can just have that for the rest of your life, because people can get fit in 6 weeks, but it's only going to last 6 weeks usually, because they went to such extremes to get there that it's unsustainable.
Right.
I don't know if that actually has anything to do with thought mining, but
I mean, it's a great insight, and I think this is a good example of demonstrating how even in conversation or dialogue, we can go into all of these different directions.
Right.
And it's kind of like an outward sort of manifestation of the thoughts that go through our mind that seem
absolutely
disconnected and kind of go all over in all these different places.
Right.
And so our role is to kind of figure out which of those sort of mean something, and can we take something from.
Yep. So trying to get to, I mean, I don't know how much time we've been going, but 31 minutes. So I'm wondering, do we want to get through the whole essay, or do we want to?
I don't know. Maybe we cut it. Do you think? And then
we could even revisit it, because I'm just thinking about like how I honestly feel like we have said something in this half hour.
Yeah.
And if we go too long, then we're just going to get people bored anyway. So
yeah, I know. You kind of go into one of those long form episodes, which I found myself like drawn to sometimes, but I don't know that this is.
It really depends on the subject matter. So, like for instance, like say Joe Rogan podcast is 3 hours long. 99% of the time, I don't want to listen to 3 hours of that shit stuff. But sometimes they'll have like a guy who's like about ancient Egypt, Egyptologist or something like that, and then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm in for this, because I just want to know about the Egyptology,
right.
And that's interesting to me. But so maybe someone who really wants to know about thought mining is going to be fascinating. I wish this was longer.
Yeah.
Half hour is not enough. You need 3 hours of this.
Well, that would be cool. Then we'll make more episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like in conclusion, right? So let's kind of, I guess, wrap it up. Thought mining, the name of our podcast, the way of life that we're we're advocating, right? So we're saying, hey, to the listener, to the viewer, you can mine your own thoughts, and there's value in there. Is that true for every single person, do you think?
Gosh, the every single person statement always like throws me for a loop. I'm like not sure if I can be convinced that every single person is going to glean value from it or not. But I think there are certain people
right.
who sure will.
I think the difference between someone who won't and someone who will is probably willingness, in terms of if you hear what we're talking about and you say, wow, like, trying to tame my thoughts or trying to find me, you can't tame your thoughts probably, but trying to, let's say, wrestle a little bit of more control than, is, let's say, common, is valuable and worth my time. And if you have that willingness to do that, you're going to find the value. But if you're going to be someone who's like, I'd rather watch TV, I want to know what's on the news, I want to externalize, I don't want to go inside, then you're probably just going to kind of put up a wall and not get any value out of it. But, I think it's a choice, really. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I think willingness is a big part of it. And it makes me think, too, that you can overdo it in the same type of a way that you're talking about overdoing physical exercise. And so if you just find yourself constantly sort of like wrestling with and in your own mind, people, you hear that being referred to as navel gazing and having a negative connotation with that.
Yep.
I feel like I do that probably to a pretty great extent, but I've found ways, I think, to to do it within healthy parameters, I guess.
Right. And I think also, like, with the whole navel gazing thing, it's kind of like the criticism would be that you must really think your thoughts are so important, or you think you know what I mean? So you're self-obsessed or whatever. And, I think that there obviously could be like a point where you thought mind to excess, right? To where that would be a valid criticism. But I don't know. I mean, in the modern world, who has time to do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, who has time to sit around and navel gaze, really? I mean, I could see how, because I think that term kind of came out of the 90s, sort of like indie music type of thing, or writing from that era, first person writing from that era. But the 90s just seemed like a real navel gazing time, because it just without the internet and, without cell phones, it just seemed like, I don't want to say... I mean, it's just a different time period, really. There was just seemingly more opportunity for silence,
mm-hmm.
more opportunity for reflection and things like that. Whereas today, there's always a distractive option at the tip of your fingers,
mm-hmm.
where, TV wasn't that good back in the day. It's like you don't want to sit and watch Days of Our Lives. You'd probably rather do something outside, when we were kids. So... why would if we had every entertainment option, if someone brought us a tablet and said you can watch Transformers, you can watch He-Man, you can watch Ninja Turtles, you can watch everything, any episode all at once, we'd probably be like, oh, I'll do that.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna go play football or play catch. I'm gonna go watch every episode of my favorite show.
Right. Right.
So it's just different times, I guess. But so part of the thing about, I think, with thought mining is it's something you have to carve out awareness for intentionally. You
mm-hmm.
can't think you're going to accidentally get slapped with some thought mining, or you're going to accidentally fall. I mean, you did, I guess, but most of us don't fall into, a hole of thought on a regular schedule, because it's so easy to get busy and externalize.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to say, well, I don't want to deal with these uncomfortable thoughts or these feelings. I'm just going to go find some work to do. There's always work
mm-hmm.
to do, right?
Right.
So
right.
That's, I think, a challenge, I guess, and also maybe that's a challenge that someone watching this would say, well, I don't have time to sit around and stare at my belly button, or whatever.
Right.
So...
sometimes it just happens, like even just kind of going through your day. It might happen on my way back to my office.
Mm-hmm.
After this, I might be walking back and something all of a sudden just pops in mind,
Right.
That seems to resonate.
Well, what's wonderful about what you're saying is that you're leaving a space for something surprising.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe a lot of us don't even everything's organized in these sort of ways, and we don't have an empty shelf sitting there for like what might come today,
mm-hmm.
That we're not expecting.
Yeah, that's a great visual. I love the empty shelves. Walking around with that.
About the visuals.
You might have a lot of full shelves that you're carrying around too with important information, but keeping that empty shelf
right.
open for something else that's worthwhile to just
mm-hmm.
kind of make its way into there is pretty special.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for being a part of this podcast with me. I think it's we got lots of places to go.
Yeah, we do. There's this thought that sort of surfaced as we were talking through this as a way maybe to sort of summarize this. And I don't know. Let me know what you think. Of course, we can play with it and wordsmith it and totally scratch it all together if we want. But
okay.
As thought miners, we pay deliberate attention to the thoughts and perspectives of ourselves and others to help make sense of the world around us.
I love that. I love the deliberate attention, because when I hear deliberate attention, I hear that, like, for me to give you deliberate attention, for instance, I need to be intentional about that in terms of, deliberate, right? So I need to like get into my own head and say, Derek, shut up and listen to Nathan and listen for each word and for its meaning. And instead, because sometimes, like, even in this conversation, you'll say something and that makes me think of something. And then I go down this road, whereas I really need to stay on your road, not jump off onto my own road, because until I've gotten to the exact meaning that you're trying to share, until I feel like I really understand that, I really don't understand that. So sometimes we think, well, that reminds me of this. And so because it reminds you of that, you're then going to, like, say, take this thing that you said and then lump it over here with that thing it reminds you of.
Right.
Whereas it's not that thing. That's just a bias.
Yeah.
This is this and that is that. Stay here and focus on that,
right.
And don't worry about this. You got to let this go sometimes. And that might be the stream too. So maybe one thing I'm stumbling on here is co-thought mining to an extent in terms of, like, as you're talking, if you say something that's going to resonate with me, I need to stay on your experience of that thing, at least until I fully understand it, rather than, well, let me share my experience with a similar thing that's kind of like that, but not really on all levels,
Yeah, there's probably a place for both of those approaches.
Right, yeah.
To an extent.
Yep. And hopefully, I think with me, that's probably what you'll get, right? Because as much as I say I'm going to give the deliberate intention, I also have, like the rabbit brain, a little bit. So, I'll probably be, very intentional, and then very unintentional, and very intentional, and then very unintentional. But,
right.
It is what it is. Try to strengthen the muscle, I guess.
Yeah.
The thought mining muscle.
The thought mining muscle. Yeah. I'm working on mine as well. So
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I think mine got stronger just in this conversation.
Likewise, man. And mine did as well.
And hopefully that's the same for everyone out there in the audience. And please stick with us in the future. I think we've got exciting directions we can go. And we'll be back.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
So subscribe or whatever. Like and subscribe.
You got it.
Smash that like button.
Right.
Yeah.
Do it.
It helps the algorithm it helps the algorithm let people discover us.
People who want to discover us, right?
People who need to discover us.
Yeah. Want, need, interested in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah.